Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to give folks a few more moments to join us, and then we'll get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Making the Case for Recycling webinar. My name is Dee Rogers Smith, and I am the Chief of RCRA Programs and Material Management at EPA Region 4, Atlanta, Georgia. I am excited to moderate today's webinar, and we have some excellent presenters whom I will introduce in a moment. Today's goal is to train yourself to advocate for your recycling program. This webinar is one of a two-part series and a workshop. The 101 webinar held on September 13th was recorded and is available. As a recap, in 101, we learned the advantages of understanding and managing financial aspects of your solid waste programs and by using the Funding and Accounting Handbook. Some helpful tips on how to engage elected officials, and finally, a case study from Rutherford County, North Carolina was shared detailing the process of optimizing and increasing recycling at their convenience centers. Again, the goal of the Integrated Solid Waste Management Toolkit is to train people to advocate and adopt expansion of their recycling programs in an integrated system through training, guides, and directional tools. The toolkit consists of two tools, the Funding and Accounting Handbook. The Integrated Solid Waste Management Model is an interactive Excel-based directional tool that guides a municipality to service options. On today's webinar, we will introduce another tool in the EPA Region 4 Integrated Solid Waste Management Toolkit. You will hear from elected officials on how to engage other elected officials in your county or districts. You will also learn how the recycling program scenario or integrated solid waste model and see a demo. And lastly, we will hear a case study from a county in Georgia. We will wrap up the series with a more in-depth half-day workshop at the CERTIC conference in the fall in Charleston, South Carolina. This will be an interactive workshop with discussion and hands-on assistance for using and teaching others on how to use these tools. We encourage you to attend the webinar series and training, share these opportunities with friends or co-workers, and also finally consider hosting an event in your neck of the woods to train others on making the case for recycling. EPA Region 4, we realize that many of you have experienced recent changes in recycling markets. These uncertainties have left many state or local representatives feeling unsure how to best engage their decision makers about recycling changes and how these changes will directly impact your programs. That is why EPA, with the help of RRS, created the tools that you will hear about on today's webinar. Again, we strive to give you an opportunity and to empower you to make your recycling programs the very best that they can be. Today's speakers, they will do just that. I am very pleased to introduce our expert speaker panel. Our first speaker is Ray Jeffers. He is the Commissioner of Pierson County, North Carolina. Our second speaker is Yuri Freeman, and he's a Senior Consultant at Resource Recycling Systems. And our third speaker is Kevin Barkley. He is the Director of Solid Waste for Macon-Bibbs County, Georgia. And just before we start, I just have a few brief technical details that I would like to share with you. You should be able to hear us through although all attendees are muted. If you have technical questions about the audio or visual or have questions, please look at the orange arrow at the right of your screen and also send us a message through the question box. You can respond to your technical questions throughout the presentation. The speakers will address all questions at the end of the webinar. Finally, there will be a recording available for you on our website. Next, I would like to introduce Ray Jeffers.
Thank you, Dee. Again, my name is Ray Jeffers, Commissioner from Person County, North Carolina, and I'm pleased to come with you all today to kind of share with you a little bit about what we're doing here in Person County and how that came to be. We actually, in our county, operate a material recycling facility, a MRF, that came about in 2009. We use a county department, Person Industries, which is a community rehabilitation program that trains people with disabilities for jobs in the community. Those employees receive some on-the-job work experiences through Person Industries, and they operate the Person County Recycling Center. Next slide. To give you a little idea about how it came about, it was not always a county department. It was kind of run through mental health here in North Carolina. And over the years, as things kind of changed with mental health, they were kind of left out there on their own. And so the county actually brought them in kind of under us. It brought our number of employees here in a small rural county up to 400 employees. But through that, we received some state and federal funds to help operate that department. And throughout the years, they were doing various jobs, working with workforce training and different manufacturing facilities we had here in the county. They also did different contract work where they had like the B-line designs, where they did a lot of embroidery. They did shredding for local businesses and so on and so on. Well, it got to a point where some of those contracts were getting less and less, and so we had a unique opportunity here in Person County to where we have one municipality, the city of Roxborough, had actually stopped doing curbside recycling. And they just kind of got into a budget issue where they couldn't afford to do it anymore. All the county had was a one-stop. You had to sort your materials. We had it manned by a part-time staff person. It was in the city of Roxborough, which is pretty much the center of the county. And it gave us an opportunity to look at using Person Industries to run our recycling center. And so what we actually ended up doing was, in developing the MRF, was making a one-stop. No longer had to sort your materials. You can dump it all in the same bin. We have conveyor belts where the employees there do the sorting, the baling, and so on for that, for the recycling. And it has really worked well for us. It opened for us in 2009. There at the facility, we accept aluminum cans, batteries, cardboard, electronics. We had to start charging for some of the electronics because it obviously started costing us to recycle some of those items. But in order to keep those out of our regional landfill, we chose to continue to accept those, but just add a little charge for doing so. Fluorescent lights, glass bottles, liquids that include antifreeze, cooking oil, diesel fuel, hydraulic fluid, kerosene, motor oil, and transmission fluid, which in a rural county, that has really made a difference for us because a lot of people do their own work, but we didn't want those liquids to end up just being poured out on the ground. Oil filters, paper, paint, our different plastics, scrap metal, steel cans, thermostats, tires. Again, we used to take tires for free, but then as it kind of started costing us to recycle those, we start charging. White goods and wood pallets. You would be amazed at a rural county here in Person County with the number of companies we have that do manufacturing but had no place to take their wood pallets. And they kind of resort basically to offering them to people for free and they don't always get rid of them that way. And so we decided that we would start taking those at a cost. Our disposal forecast, this only goes to kind of 2009, but this is the information that we were receiving in order, as a decision maker or a policy maker, to decide if we would go ahead and fund the MRF. And this is the type of data that I would suggest that, you see this goes from 91 to 2009. It gave us a lot of information to look at when making that decision. And anytime you go to your policymakers or your elected officials, we always like to say it's best to have your homework done. And I shouldn't say it as an elected official, but they don't always do their homework. So if you do it for them, that kind of helps make their decisions sometimes. In North Carolina, here's just a kind of a pie chart of our waste stream, just more information that they brought to us as a board, to where we kind of could look at recycling across the state. Sorry, a little difficulty with the slides. Next slide, please. I will say, as we're getting the slides to get them to working again, in Person County, it was a huge discussion about our recycling. We have a regional landfill that is operated by a private company. They pay the county to operate here, franchise agreement that we have with them. They also, within that agreement, give a certain amount of money towards recycling. So we were in a situation where there was less recycling being done in the county, which was kind of helped us base our decision, as well as having these funds that were coming in kind of earmarked for recycling that we needed to do something with. Our regional landfill obviously has been kind of a hot topic here in the county. And so the more things that we can do to divert waste and things going into that landfill, it obviously makes the people who live out in that area feel a little bit better. We also had the opportunity to have other groups to kind of engage and come in and talk to the commissioners about the importance of recycling here in the county. I always tell people when you're advocating to your elected officials, to make sure you have your people clout, have your people there. We tend to listen to rooms full of people. And so make sure you're organized, you have the people there, have someone designated to speak that kind of can share all of your points instead of having several speakers but saying kind of the same thing, or have several speakers that share different views, so to speak, about the subject that you're coming to talk to us about. In this case, it was recycling. So not only did we have a local environmental group to form from this kind of organizing to start the recycling center, but they brought in other groups as well, like retired teachers associations, who actually raised money and were able to buy recycling bins that they put in all of our public schools here in the county. And so they kind of really built that coalition prior to coming to speak to us. And not to mention, again, being that the department that we were looking at operating the recycling facility worked with people with disabilities, their families, their parents, their brothers, their sisters, grandparents, so on, they all came to our meeting and supported continuing that department for the good work that they were doing. At that time, obviously, we're a 20-mile by 20-mile county. We could not afford to do curbside, but we do have 2 private haulers here in the county that now do recycling. And so they pick up once a week. You pay them by the month. They pick up your trash, or they pick up and your recycling if you pay for the extra for the recycling. And they bring those materials to our recycling facility. So that did one of 2 things. It kept, obviously, that waste that was generally going into their trash cans when they decided to offer recycling, those private haulers. It kept those things out of the landfill, and it kept the county from kind of having to go into that business, so to speak. And by them bringing it into our facility, obviously, it increased the materials that we had to work with when we were going out looking for buyers for those materials. Again, because of the department that we chose to operate the recycling center, working with people with disabilities, we were able to receive some state grant funds and things to kind of help out on the initial cost, especially the capital cost of buying the baler, and the conveyor belt, the sorting machine, and so on. And the county pretty much, we purchased a building, former warehouse that we kind of upfitted to, so they could go in and go right to work. Why was recycling important to Person County? Some of the talking points that they brought into us was obviously the limited natural resources, that it saves, it prevents air and water pollution, which was big for us. We have 2 coal burning plants here in the county, and so that was just kind of always a hot topic that we try to watch anyway, and saves energy, provides raw materials for the industry, and in this situation with us, it not only created some jobs, but it retained jobs, because had we not started the recycling center, those people at Person Industries would not have had, with the contracts they were losing, they would have been out of a job. Saves landfill space, obviously, improves our nation's ability to compete, and it keeps habitats intact. We have a lot of farms here in rural North Carolina, and we do have issues with dumping and so on. And it also reduces the greenhouse gas emissions. A couple of facts here. 6,700 aluminum cans are used every second. 120,000 aluminum cans are recycled every minute. All of that aluminum only makes up about 1% of the solid waste in America. No limit to how many times aluminum cans or aluminum or glass can be recycled. It takes about 500,000 trees to make all the paper used each week, just to print the Sunday paper across the county. About 2,500,000 plastic bottles get used every hour in the United States alone, and almost 90% of Americans have access to either drop-off or curbside recycling. What elected officials need to know. We're always wondering, or we're always worried about your money, the taxpayers' money. And so when coming to us about these issues, be very specific about what we will be doing with those taxpayers' dollars. Obviously show that there is a need, that there's resident interest in recycling. Again, good use of the taxpayers' dollars, bring in a crowd to show the need. Have your data ready, have those charts, that information ready for us to kind of to read over and digest. A lot of elected officials, we receive our agenda packet with all the information prior to the meeting. So make sure you get that information in early to the offices so they can be included, so they can have time to kind of do their own research and homework and ask questions if need be prior to the meeting. Public-private partnership for funding. We're always looking for opportunities that we can partner with private industries or nonprofits. So if there is a way to do so, which obviously will save some of the taxpayers' dollars, we're always interested in hearing those ideas. Do a little bit more than just showing up at the meeting. Some elected officials, I'm not one, I represent the whole county, but if they represent a district, or when we talk about our state and federal legislators, don't always go to meet with them in their office. Invite them out, especially your state and legislator, your state and your federal. Invite them out to see their district, to see where where you live, the issues that you're discussing, why there is a need. Don't just always go to, for us in North Carolina, Raleigh, or for the feds, DC, and advocate. Invite them out to your area, to their district. And thank you all again for having me today, and I look forward to your questions at the end. Next, I think we have Yuri Freeman, Senior Consultant of the Resource Recycling Systems.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ray Jeffers. I appreciate it. My name is Yuri Freeman. I'm as Ray said, a senior consultant here at RRS. We got an office out in Ann Arbor. I'm based in Boulder, Colorado. And my background is I'm in the private sector now as a consultant. I'm an economist. I've also spent about 3 years or so as a recycling manager for the city and county of Denver in Colorado. So I've got some public sector experience as well. I'm going to talk a bit about this integrated solid waste management tool that we developed for EPA Region 4. I've got about 10 to 12 minutes to go through it, and I'm not going to go into detail about the tool today. I'm going to give an overview of the goals, how it was developed, and then we have about a 2-minute instructional video of how to actually use the tool. But for folks that are interested in learning more or want to get in depth about it, go to CERTIC's website, and there you could email our team through the website. And there's also, as Dean mentioned at the beginning, there'll be a hands-on, in-depth dive into this at the CERTIC conference coming up. So the goals of the tool are really to provide local governments a set of decision-making tools around what choices you should make in solid waste management. Should you do a drop-off or curbside collection? If you choose curbside, it should be single stream or dual stream, or the frequency of that collection. This came out of some work in EPA Region 4 a couple of years back, where there's a bunch of stakeholder meetings, and this is what stakeholders at the meeting said they wanted to hear or wanted to get out of the tool. Next slide, please, Marissa. So the tool, I will talk about this a bit more in depth here in a minute, but what it really does is it compares different scenarios for collection as well as hub and spoke. Within collection, what's really showing is drop-off versus dual stream collection, and that could be in carts or bins, versus single stream collection. And for all of those options, with the exception of drop-off, we have differences in collection frequency. If you want to collect once a week versus twice a week, the aim of the tool is to allow decision makers to say, okay, what are the trade-offs between the cost and the impact? So if weekly collection is more expensive because you're going by the houses more often, is that expense justified because you're collecting enough tons? You're collecting much more tons. And is that cost per ton actually cheaper, even though the total cost is more expensive? Additionally, in the integrated solid waste management tool, you can see the results of hub and spoke. The way we approached the hub and spoke part was to say, really, should you build a transfer station, or should your community go direct haul to another facility, to an existing transfer station or MRF, or should you develop your own MRF? So should you be a spoke, and that would be potentially direct haul or transfer station, or become a hub? And to be a hub, it will be either a large-scale transfer station or perhaps a small-scale to large-scale MRF. I don't want to talk too much about the background of what went into the tool, but I did want to give you all a little bit of idea of the work that's underlying it. This kind of messy-looking slide here shows the collection, the way we developed the collection model. All that really matters as for folks looking at this is that top left is you'll see an input page, and then you'll see the bottom right page is the one in orange, and they'll show up on one page in the results. You'll be able to input your data, and on the back end, you'll see the total cost and the total impacts in terms of tonnage. What you don't see in the tool, what was really the guts of the tool, is all the stuff we had to do to figure out what these costs and impacts were. So using your input data, we look at the route cost, the fuel, the fleet, the carts, the staff, how many tons you collect, where those tons are sent, the tip fees, cost of education are built into the tool. So all that stuff is calculated, and there's a bunch of underlying assumptions I'll talk about in a minute that you don't get, as a user, you don't get to change those assumptions. The reason we did that is we didn't want to have an input page where we asked the user to put in 50 different inputs. We kept it really simple. There's 11 inputs, and you get the answer. Next page, please. Similarly, we have a bunch of pages for the hub and spoke. that are not visible to the user. But really what the hub and spoke part of the tool is doing is taking the output of the collection. So how many tons are you going to be collecting in your community, or your county, municipality, and what is the distance to existing facilities? And based on those pieces of information, along with a couple cost curves that underlie it, should you direct haul it? Should you build a facility, or do you have to get more tons and build a facility to make it cost effective? A couple of the assumptions underlying the tool that are important to bring up are, one is we are comparing scenarios, not changes. So we debated, can we allow a user to say, okay, my community is this big, we have dual stream collection today, what's it going to cost me to change to single stream? When we start to dive into that methodology, we figured out, gosh, there are just too many variables to do it. And a lot of folks, when we start to ask them the average age of their fleet, what types of trucks they have, who's the make, who built the chassis, all that types of stuff, and that's the type of information you would need to do the change, just wasn't available data. So instead what the tool does is it shows all 7 scenarios and allows the user to say, okay, scenario A versus scenario B, was the difference in cost and difference in tons. It is a directional model to fit a wide range of users. In the previous slide, I talked about the fact that there's a lot of underlying assumptions that we don't allow the users to change. The fact that we want to make this tool available for all the states in the region, and we want to make it really easy to use. You don't have to be a recycling expert to do so. Means that the results of it wouldn't be enough aren't the pro forma. You shouldn't use the results and go to your city council or your town council and say, our program is going to cost $400,032.07. It just will not give you that level of detail, but will allow you to see that one program is cheaper or more expensive than another. A couple of the other assumptions that are important is that it's really for single-family residential service. So the tool does not, it's all cart or bin-based collection. If you're in a community that's highly dense with multifamily, it's dumpster-based recycling collection, or you're looking at commercial, the tool is not built for that. It's really for residential collection. It's also not built for an open market. So if you're a community with 10 different haulers, fully open market, anyone can service your community, you wouldn't realize some of the efficiencies or economies of scale that are in the tool. So we assume that in the model, if you're entering this data, it's for your entire community. So all of the households are serviced by the same company or by the municipality. And lastly, there are some updates pending for 2018. The tool was built in 2016, and it was published last year. So some of the data, although most of it is still very relevant, as we all know, there's been some relatively big changes, especially with recycling markets in the last few months. So we are working on updating a few of those. So over the next 2 minutes here, we're going to play a quick video, and I'm going to wait till I can see on my screen. I'm going to try and narrate the video. All right, I can see it, so hopefully y'all can see it too. So it lives on the CERTIC website. If you get to the CERTIC website, you can download the tool. When you download it, it is an Excel spreadsheet. As you can see on the bottom, there are 4 different pages. You have instructions, inputs, results for hub, results for collection. We're looking at the inputs page now. There's 11 questions. For each of the questions, other than the first one, it's a drop down. If you have questions about the questions, if you aren't sure what we're asking, refer back to the instructions page, and each one of these 11 questions has an annotated description of what we're looking for. For each of the 11 options, there's also a default option. So if you don't know much about your community, just use the default. This is showing that if you don't answer the questions, all 11, you'll get some weird responses. So you have to answer all 11. The user right now is doing the default questions for the first 7. And then for 8, 9, and 10, we get a little more specific that says, do you actually know your landfill tip fee per ton? And if you do, if you answer yes, you have to fill in the number on the right there. If you choose no for 8, 9, 10, or 11, we'll just use a default number, which will be the average based on the state that you're located in. If you choose that you know your processor gate fee, and it is a fee, not a revenue, make sure to put the negative sign in front of it. So it shows up, as in this example, -10. Once these last 2 are filled out, we'll switch to results. So once you fill them out, just go to the next page. There's 2 results, one for collection, one for hub and spoke. on each of those, as you scroll down, there's a whole section for interpreting your results. So if you have any questions about what these results mean, you can just scroll down and see what they are. Hub and spoke, which is the page we're on now, you do have to choose what types of collection you want. That's the only thing you change on this page. But same as the results for collection, you can scroll down and see what the annotated results. So if you don't understand what cost per ton, including revenue, means, just scroll down and there's a definition right below it. And once again, this was the quick 2-minute demo. It will be up on CERDIC's website as will this entire webinar. So if you weren't taking notes or you didn't want to take notes and I speak too fast, just look on the website and you can hear a recording of this. And we'll also be doing the in-depth workshop at the CERDIC conference coming up in November. So my last 2 slides, I just want to show a little bit about what the collection results and the hub and spoke outputs look like. Once again, when you use the tool, all of these rows 1 through 14, there is really good, there's definitions about what these mean. If I was using this tool and I was reading my results, I would look at the top rows across. You can see you've got recycling drop-off on the left, and all the way on the right, you've got implementing a single-stream residential curbside program. So if you look across a row, for instance, row 1, tons of recycling per year, you can see that the recycling drop-off program in this scenario would get you 1,700 tons. Single stream with weekly collection all the way on the right would get you 4,700 tons, 4,800. So significantly more recycling. But then you start to look down at some of the costs and you say, gosh, well, the costs are also more. So those are where the decision-making points are. So yeah, it gets you more tons, but are you willing to pay more? And do you want to pay more? Is it worth the extra money to get those extra tons? Next slide, please. Lastly, this is the output of the hub and spoke. So same model, just a different page on that worksheet. Once again, there's only 4 pages on the worksheet. Instructions, and then you've got the input. Fill out all 11 questions on the inputs, and you get these 2 output pages, 1 for collection, 1 for hub and spoke. The hub and spoke output shows in this scenario, or this whoever filled this out, Chatham County, that they're getting 47 or 4,800 tons basically of single stream, and with it, it looks, if you compare the direct haul versus building their own transfer station, at the annual cost of operating those 2 different scenarios, that for this community, and it will depend on the distance to the facility, you have to choose your distance, that building a transfer station actually is less expensive. Whether or not you have the capital to do it's another matter, but to operate it annually is less expensive. You can also tell in this output that, building a single stream MRF with only 4,800 tons really doesn't make a lot of sense. So in fact, we just give it a not feasible response here. To make it a feasible response at the lowest level that really makes it efficient based on the input data, this community would need to collect about 18,000 more tons to get to that single stream MRF. They could either do that by becoming a hub, so find some other communities that will bring them those tons, or expanding and partnering with other communities. The last thing this output tells you is that you could switch to a more effective, at 5,200 tons, if you get more tons, you can build a more efficient transfer station. That's pretty much it for the outputs there. Thank you, Marissa. And so the big takeaways here, this was the overview, the quick overview of the modeling tool. The previous webinar, which is also up on CERDIC, was the overview of the accounting guide. The 2 tools work in tandem to provide decision makers with the data they need to choose what they want to do. If you're interested in learning more, please go visit CERDIC's website. You can reach RRS through that website if you have direct questions for us. And of course, we'd love to see you out at the workshop coming up here in about a month and a half in Charleston. At that point, it's a 3-hour workshop. We won't do this for 15 minutes. We'll get to do this for an hour. But thank you very much. And now I'm going to pass off the microphone to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Mr. Kevin Barkley, and he is the Solid Waste Director for Macon-Bibbs County, Georgia.
Our next speaker is Kevin Barkley. He's the solid waste director at Bibb County, Georgia, in Macon.
Thank you. I'm sorry I had it on mute. Welcome everybody. Here in Macon-Bibbs County, Georgia, we're in the means of trying to develop our new infrastructure. But a brief background on me, I've been in the solid waste business for 25 years. Developed a mandatory recycling program in a previous employment with about 8,000 homes. Also received a grant from the Department of Community Affairs in Georgia to develop a hub type situation. Small communities brought us materials and we were a spoke, taking it to a private company to have it sorted. But here in Macon, Georgia, we're using the tools and we've got some infrastructure problems that we have to develop. Macon-Bibbs County is a new government. We're just getting established. We finally put a consolidated program together for solid waste and recycling in 2016. Our current population is about 153,000 with about 48,000 residential homes. We have received a SPLOST money we put into collect money in the upcoming SPLOST to close our Walker Road landfill, which is a vertically expanded landfill that we need to close and get out of. We use a private contractor to help us collect our residential waste. We're currently collecting our recycling and bulk waste items. So with that, we're developing the new current infrastructure. We developed a county-wide recycling program. So we're currently up to about 10,000 residents that are recycling every other week with containers out there at the curbside. Our considerations are, what are we going to do once we close the landfill, and what's our infrastructure going to look like in the future? So our question was, do we build a MRF or a transfer station or both on the site that we're going to need for the future? And hopefully this infrastructure will take us, 25, 30 years into the future. Increasing recycling volume is what we're working on now. We currently take our material to a transfer station that's shipped probably about 30 miles to a local company that sorts it. We're also looking at possible public-private partnerships going forward with our transfer station and our MRF. And we're also got the local political buy-in with the SPLOST money. With the money, we're going to, like I said, close the landfill and develop the new infrastructure. Part of our purchasing the land and everything too is for our landfill closure. We hope to find a site that is suitable. I need 500,000 cubic yards of dirt just to close the landfill. So we're hopefully the same site we can develop our new infrastructure on. We're working on building cost and equipment cost. All the items are going into, developing the recycling center and the transfer station with a possible private-public partnership on that. Using the model, these are the numbers from Macon-Bibbs County. We're using the single stream carts every other week. So we are on the residential side, showing how much we collect. We're currently developing that program still, putting out more and more carts as we get them available and putting them out. The program we're also looking at in the future is, having other communities in this area bring that material to us. And also there's a vast amount of commercial and industrial that is not getting recycled here that we're also going to have to consider when we look at these hub or spoke options. As you can see on that one, it wasn't feasible on that slide to actually build it just based on residential. So we'll investigate this more, have some talks with surrounding communities and decide which way we're going to go in the future. Adding the extra tonnage would be a plus for us. It would also develop a Middle Georgia recycling program. There's very few options here in Middle Georgia where people can bring their materials to. A lot of them do get recycled, but they usually go right to the recycling plant. There's not many places that you could just bring it and drop it off. That is a conceptual drawing of a possible 60,000 square foot facility for our MRF, along with an education and training center, because that's just as important. Here's a conceptual design of our transfer station on the far left-hand side of that, with the recycling center and a drop-off for residential. We're actually designing this for a commercial type drop-off for private haulers, other governments to bring us the materials to this facility, not necessarily for residents to bring stuff unless it's in small quantities like pickup trucks. The tool allows us to set our goals and our objectives in getting this done. We looking at it, so now we know what type of situation we're in and what type of materials we're going to need to build this. We have planned for our future capital expenditures, and it gives us time to educate the commissioners and our public and the surrounding community, along with our industrial authorities and our commercial businesses in this area.
I'd like to thank our panelists for their time. Now we'd like to open it up for questions. Don't forget to type in your questions on the sidebar of your screen, and we'll be taking questions from the panelists now. Ray, I have a question for you. What actions do you recommend when anticipating pushback from one or two elected officials?
I think that's where you come in with your people clout. You got to get your people there. You got to kind of anticipate, or maybe after the first meeting, you will anticipate who will be your naysayers. And if they're elected and been elected for a while, you kind of know where their base is, and you kind of have to energize or get some of those people from their base there to that meeting to kind of try to sway them a little bit. Or if you know that they're more of a conservative type commissioner, you can go ahead and get that type of a data to show where there will be more savings or more partnerships to lessen the impact of the tax dollar.
Thank you. Next question is for Yuri. We are just starting out our recycling program. How can this tool help, and how do you recommend we present it to our decision makers?
Thank you. That's an excellent question. So if you have no recycling program and you're just starting out, you're saying we don't have drop-offs, we don't have curbside, we don't have anything, I would put in my data into the tool and see what the response is, see what the output is. Does it make sense for you to just do a drop-off given your budget and your population, or do you have the ability to do a single stream collection with weekly collection? And then presenting it to elected officials, I would stay away from saying this is the final exact cost. I think that the way that they presented in Macon-Bibbs was a great way to do it. Say, gosh, we looked at the tool, we found the output that says, to make the MRF, we can do it, but we need to get some more tons to make it efficient. So use it as the directional model and say, this is the way we're heading, and here's what it would look like to get there.
Thank you, Yuri. Our next question is for Kevin. Do you have any tips for funding sources for hub and spoke / MRF projects?
Funding sources could be your sales tax options, or look for grant money that might be available from the EPA regions. Also, consider taking out, maybe your state has investment loans and green programs for that are low interest, that you can tap into. We have looked at several of those different options, along with just having the SPLOST money to do this, but also consider taking on a private partnership.
Thank you very much, Kevin. This has been a great webinar, and thank you for attending. This webinar series gave you an overview of EPA's Integrated Solid Waste Management Tool. We are offering a more in-depth, hands-on training using the tool and the guide and the model at the upcoming half-day workshop at the Certic Fall Summit, November 12th, 2018 in Charleston, South Carolina. There is a link in the chat box if you're interested in signing up. Again, this will be an interactive workshop with discussion and hands-on assistance. And I think it'll be very beneficial for all of you if you can attend. Again, today's webinar was recorded and will be available shortly on www.certic.org, Integrated Solid Waste Management. If you missed the first webinar in the series, it is uploaded and available at the same web address. And again, just to summarize, we hope that this gives you a taste of helpful tools for local governments. And again, thank you all for your time, and we look forward to seeing you in person in Charleston, South Carolina. Thank you.